to sit in the seat where I don't look as fat on the live stream.
I was wondering why you came in and you sat in that chair instead.
This is the best chair to sit in for the live stream. This is the straight on. My silhouette is just not. It's not made for camera, Manny. The silhouette, the face, the body is just not made for camera. So I am glad I got this seat today. Is Collar going to be in time for his show at 2:00 after the press conference, or am I hosting every show on Score North?
That will be interesting. We'll see. We'll have to check with Matthew when we get him on.
But out of the gates, we wanted to take a look at an article from ESPN.com, and they went around looking how teams around the NFL can get out of salary cap hell. And Courtney Cronin, our very own, who you can catch on this show on Tuesdays along with Matthew Collar, she handled the duties for the Minnesota Vikings and some options that they have to clear some space, Manny. And it actually leads right into our position-by-position breakdown and the position we were planning to get to today, which is defensive line. They have some interesting choices there that could free up some money. But between you and me, Manny, and if you want to get in at 651-6466, I wanted to take a look at the options that they have to clear some money and see how much money you and I can clear for the Minnesota Vikings to go into free agency. Sound good?
That works for me.
All right. So the first facet that she looks at is clearing out or restructuring along the offensive line. She first brings up Riley Reif, who has a cap figure of $11.7 million. They don't have a lot of wiggle room with Riley Reif. They will probably move him to guard, but as far as the money goes, he would be a big cap hit if they let him go, or if they just cut him and let him go. So Riley Reif, you are stuck with that $11.7 million. Then she looks at tackle turned guard Mike Remmers. He has a $6.35 million cap hit, but if they cut him, it would come with a just $1.8 million in dead money. So that would free up about $4.55 million. Are you willing to let go of Mike Remmers, Manny Hill, and save yourself $4.55 million?
Yes.
Okay. So
and I am, because he was moved to right guard in 2018 and he was not good there. He was the best option there, unfortunately, but he wasn't good there, and they need to somehow, some way upgrade that position. And I think with that cap number, and he's probably not going to be a starting tackle on either tackle spot. I think Brian O'Neill is probably in a good position to be the right tackle. I think it's opening things up for Mike Remmers to be cut.
So we just saved the Vikings for a little over $4.5 million, just like that.
Okay.
See how easy that is, people. She said, Courtney said, you could also opt to release the likes of Danny Isidora, who makes just over $500,000, and Aviante Collins, who makes just over $600,000. If they're looking to totally revamp the offensive line. Do you want to go that far, Manny, or should we stop with Remmers and the $4.5 million that we saved and keep that O-line depth?
I'll probably stop with Remmers. The thing with Isidora was basically Remmers' backup at right guard.
Right.
So it's like if Remmers played right guard and he wasn't very good there and he was your best option, I mean, at this point, it's like you're probably looking at Danny Isidora and saying, okay, well, I mean, are they going to go in a different direction as like a backup guard or something like that?
Right.
I don't
now
know.
you're really cleaning out the cupboard.
Yeah,
and
you got to have bodies.
I was going to say you're going to have to replace those guys with somebody, and they're not going to come much cheaper than $645,000 that Collins makes or the $594,000 that Isidora makes. So It's really, at the end of the day, that's not going to save you any money at all, because like you said, you're going to get bodies to fill those positions, and they're going to cost you. They're going to make around that, if not more. Then Courtney looks at the cornerback position, and this is something that we've talked about before, and this is probably where they stand to save the most money in terms of one player. And she throws out there again the idea of trading Xavier Rhodes because of the depth that they've developed behind him, and it would free up $13.4 million in cap space, Manny. That's a big number right there if you can find a taker for Xavier Rhodes. And in a trade, in most trades at least, it doesn't come with the dead money that often comes if you cut a guy during the contract. You're totally free and clear of $13.4 million if you let Xavier Rhodes go, if you can find a taker in a trade. Are you willing to go there?
Oh, it's a tough one. I would think about it. I'm not sure I would do it. I mean, The thing with Xavier is when he's healthy, and that has, I think, when we saw how he performed in 2018, that's a big if he's healthy. He's really, really, really good. But I think it is fair to question whether or not he can continue to stay healthy, though, because he dealt with a lot of injuries in 2018. So you start to wonder if that is something that's going to linger and continue. But when he's healthy, man, he's as good as there is
I
as
think
a cover corner in the NFL.
I think Xavier Rhodes is a very good football player and
Yeah.
probably closer to what we saw in 2017 than what we saw last year. I brought this up before when we talked about Xavier Rhodes. He was on the field for the majority of the season, but that doesn't mean that he was healthy. And
Right.
he was peak Xavier Rhodes. And I still think that he has good football left in him, but the arrow is rarely pointing up with a guy who's reached age 30. You know what I mean? So
I think he turns 29 this year.
his the majority of his best years are probably behind him, and the luxury that you have, as Courtney points out here, and as Judd has pointed out numerous times on this show, you have some depth behind him, and you have what's supposed to be a defensive minded, borderline defensive wizard head coach in Mike Zimmer, like make something out of somebody else. You know what I mean? If it saves you $13.4 million, one of these other guys can step up, and Mike Zimmer should be able to put him in a spot where he looks pretty good.
And on top of that, too, not only do you have a head coach that is highly regarded as a strong defensive mind in this league, particularly in that area of defense in the secondary with cornerbacks and safeties, that has really been Mike Zimmer's bread and butter. He's really shown over the years that he can really develop guys in those positions. And to Courtney's point and the point that you just made, you've got depth there. You've got Mike Hughes coming back from the ACL. Now we'll see how he looks when he comes back from an injury like that. But you drafted him in the first round last year, so you think very highly of him. You got really good contributions out of Holton Hill last year in the second half of the season. I mean, you have Trey Waynes, and he's another guy that you could look at maybe letting go in free agency because he has a pretty high cap number too. But you've got options in the secondary. You've got options at cornerback, and while losing Rhodes would be tough because he's, I think without question, their best guy in terms of cover corners.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got other guys. You have other options. It's not like you're depleted at that position. So it's something to definitely think about.
I think we just talked ourselves into trading Xavier Rhodes and saving $13.4 million. I think
you
that's
could probably
what
get a decent. You could probably get a decent return for him.
Okay, so that's another $13.4 million off the books in addition to the $4.5 million from Mike Remmers. We're getting somewhere here, Manny Hill. We are getting somewhere. We'll get back to the defensive ends in just 1 second. That's the next area that Courtney looks at. But again, we're going to break down the defensive end position in depth here in just a few minutes. First, though, let's look at safety. And she proposes, and I think this is one that you, me, Manny, and most Vikings fans can get behind. Seems like a good dude, a funny dude for us in the media, but Andrew Sendejo has a $5.5 million cap hit, and you can opt to move on from him.
Yeah.
A pre-June 1st release would give you $5.5 million in cap space. It's been real, Andrew Sendejo, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's gone, I think, and again, that's another position that you have options at. Anthony Harris came in, did a nice job. He's developed nicely under Mike Zimmer. I think that's a pretty easy decision.
Another $5 million off the books. Okay, then at tight end, Kyle Rudolph's deal. She says the Vikings would not part ways with their tenured tight end, but Rudolph is entering the final year of his contract, has no guaranteed money left on his deal, and carries a $7.625 million cap number. If Minnesota offers Rudolph a short-term extension along with the signing bonus to bring down his cap hit, that could free up somewhere in the range of $2 to $3 million.
Yeah, I would do that.
Okay.
I will say this, and I like Kyle Rudolph, and he's been very productive for this team for a long time now. I'm totally cool with bringing him back. I do think they need to explore other options at tight end, though, to complement him.
Let me ask you this. Do you go to him and say, look, we need to restructure or we need to part ways?
I probably would, yeah. And that's a tough thing to do because he's got a strong connection with the franchise, obviously. He's been here a long time, a strong connection with the community. He's been, Walter Payton Man of the Year
Right.
candidate and all of that stuff. I mean, Kyle's been a big, huge figure in this community, but I think you do have to think about the future of this organization. You have to make football decisions, unfortunately, and I think that's a talk they've got to sit down and have with him about restructuring. And if that's not something that he wants to do, I think they have to do what's right for the franchise and maybe part ways, because they've got other needs.
So with Rudolph, whether if he'll restructure, you can save around 2 or 3 million.
Sure.
And if you decide to just cut ties, you can save a little over 7.5 million. We are creating some real cap space for the Minnesota Vikings. I don't know if Chris Spielman needs our services, but we are available. Just hit us up at Score North. And then we get to defensive end. And we start with Everson Griffen, of course. And here's what Courtney said about Everson Griffen. Upon his return midway through the season after dealing with mental health issues, Griffen had his lowest sack total, 5.5, since 2013, when he was a rotational edge rusher. Largely considered a top 10 pass rusher, would create a hole on the defensive line. Cutting Griffen before June 1st would come with a cap savings of $10.7 million. And she points out depth at defensive end between Stephen Weatherly, Tayshawn Bauer, but might have to use a high draft pick on a defensive end to make cutting Griffen worth it. Do you cut Everson Griffen and go in a different direction at defensive end? And I know this is something that Collar has talked about on this very show and in his column at scorenorth.com. So I'll bring this up with him when Matthew Collar joins us at about 12:20. But again, let's look at the defensive end position as a whole, Manny, as we consider this decision. You have a Pro Bowl left defensive end with Danielle Hunter, so you're set there. Sheldon Richardson, it's unclear if he'll be back. That he's a free agent, right?
Yep, he is. Yep.
So you may be without one defensive tackle. If you let Everson Griffen go, you're left with two of your starting four on your defensive line, and that's Danielle Hunter and Linval Joseph. Behind those guys, Richardson and Griffen, you have Tom Johnson, Stephen Weatherly, Jalen Holmes. Is that enough depth along with the draft pick for you to be willing to part ways with Everson Griffen and save $10 million?
I think because of how much you're saving, yes. And I think because, Stephen Weatherly stepped in when Everson Griffen was out last year, and he did a pretty nice job. He's developed pretty nicely under this defense the last couple of years. And I think because you have depth there, and you're if you part ways with Everson Griffen, I think you are going to have to address it. You're going to have to address that position probably somewhere in the draft. I don't know if you'll necessarily need to do that with your first round pick. I know a lot of fans probably wouldn't be thrilled if they did that, if they used their first round pick on a defensive end, because everybody wants them to take an offensive lineman. But I think you would have to do that somewhere in the draft, whether it's second, third round, something like that, just to sort of maintain some depth there. But you've got, Stephen Weatherly stepped in and did a pretty nice job. Now the question with Stephen Weatherly is, he's been very nice as like a rotation defensive end and filling in. If you turn this into a situation where he is like the full-time starting defensive end for a full 16-game season, are you going to get sort of the same production that you would have gotten from an Everson Griffen, before the whole situation came about with Everson last year? So that's a question you got to ask yourself. But if you can save, what was it, 10 million?
10.7 million, yeah.
That's a lot of money that you'd be freeing up.
My question is this.
But it would be a tough decision to make, because Everson's been a big part of the defense.
As we go through these potential decisions that the Vikings will have to make this offseason, Manny, none of these moves individually exist in a vacuum. And we talked about trading away Xavier Rhodes to save yourself $13.4 million. Can you also afford to lose two of your three best defensive linemen? Because defense is like playing dominoes. Your front four and the pressure up front makes the job a lot easier for the guys in the back. So now if you're trading Xavier Rhodes and asking other guys to step up and fill in the void that he leaves, is that asking too much when you're also letting two of your three best pass rushers go? Is that putting too much pressure on this defense, even Mike Zimmer being who Mike Zimmer is?
It is, but this head coach has been known to be a defensive genius.
Okay.
And it's one of those things where you have to, I mean, when you go through this and when you build a good team, a team that has a lot of talent on, especially on like one side of the ball, like the Vikings have with their defense, eventually you're going to have to make some sacrifices and some guys are going to get let go. And I mean, you look at Seattle, the Legion of Boom doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
All of those guys are gone and off. I mean, Cam Chancellor's done playing, I guess, and Richard Sherman's in San Francisco, and we'll see where Earl Thomas ends up. But that was one of the great defenses that this league has ever seen. And they basically had like a 3 or 4 year window, and then they were basically dismantled. And that's just the way the NFL works now. And unfortunately for the Vikings, they're going to have to make some decisions on who they want to keep on this defense to try and keep this defense intact as much as possible, because you look on the other side of the ball, your quarterback needs help.
Right.
Your quarterback needs more weapons. Your quarterback needs an upgraded offensive line. And you can't just go out and just give everybody a bunch of money and just draft every single position of need, especially they only have 5 draft picks right now too. So they're going to have to make some tough decisions. I don't think, the guys that we've listed, that we've talked about releasing, I don't know if all of those guys are going to be gone or traded, but I think a couple of them are probably going to have to be if this team is going to make some upgrades on the other side of the ball.
So between cutting Mike Remmers, cutting or trading Xavier Rhodes, either restructuring or letting Rudolph go, letting Sendejo go, and letting Griffin go, you and I, Manny Hill, just save the Vikings somewhere between $36.5 and $41.5 million.
And you can do some
things with that.
You can do some
in
things
free
with that
agency.
money.
You could do some things with that in free agency, or you could extend Adam Thielen's contract, or you could not extend Adam Thielen's contract. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that around these parts, but we'll have that discussion coming up at 12:40. Matthew Collar, who's usually in this seat at this time for this show, he's out at the press conference for the Vikings to introduce their new assistant coaches. He'll join us live next. You're listening to Purple Daily on Score North on 1500 and scorenorth.com.
Hey, Royce, we want to show people how easy it is to find the Garage Logic podcast.
Why?
Just read this one line.
One line?
Yes.
Alexa, play Garage Logic.
Okay.
Why? I hear Joe for the last 25 years. Alexa, play Beast of Burden.
No!
My favorite phone song. I'll never be.
Oh, my God.
Finding the Garage Logic podcast is easy.
Where's Rook?
Go to GarageLogic.com, the Apple Podcast app, wherever you find your podcasts, or
Find Garage Logic on Alexa. That's enough.
Game time, all the time. ScoreNorth.com. Sports teaches us that with drive and heart, you can forge your dream of being a champion.
Not if your ambition is to watch TV.
TCL, powerful performance, premium picture. TCL, America's fastest growing TV brand, powering the TCL broadcast studios of Score North.
You don't need snow to have an adult snow day. Just head to eBay. Whether your idea of fun is binging bad TV under a fuzzy blanket in the Northeast, skateboarding barefoot in SoCal, or strapping on crampons and scaling a 10,000-foot Alaskan glacier, eBay can help you turn a free day into a me day. And make the most of your money shopping eBay deals with our best price guarantee, plus free shipping on millions of items. If it's happening on your adult snow day, it's happening on eBay.
Let's think about customization presented by Liberty Mutual Insurance.
Liberty Mutual customizes your auto insurance so you only pay for what you need. So why can't more things in life be customizable? Why can't I buy Neapolitan ice cream without strawberry? Can't I just have the chocolate and vanilla flavors I'm comfortable with? Do people even want a fruity ice cream flavor sandwiched right between the classics?
Go to LibertyMutual.com for a customized quote and you could save.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Coverage is underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Equal housing insurer.
Looking for some excitement in your next office admin job? How about working in one of the most fun environments around, at your favorite radio station? Score North is looking for an administrative assistant to work in our St. Paul office. You must have excellent proficiency in Microsoft Word and Excel and have a strong aptitude for math. You'll work with radio management, hosts, advertisers, and more in this full-time position at Hubbard Broadcasting. And right now is your chance to explore a few more.
Oh, that'll be something to watch.
Hubbard Broadcasting team.
go to HubbardBroadcasting.com for more information.
Hubbard Broadcasting is an equal opportunity employer.
Federated Mutual Insurance Company reminds
I'm glad I have an HBO subscription.
It's Phil Mackey here. Now, it's got a lot of names: aggressive driving, road rage, but it all means the same thing: risky behavior. The road can be a dangerous and unpredictable place. Focus on controlling your reactions to events while you're on the road, and do your best to avoid creating situations that might put other drivers over the edge. Or, as I say, why don't we just treat each other the same way we would face to face? Why do people get so amped up in their vehicles? Well, you can help fix that problem. Aggressive driving behaviors are pretty tough to name as direct causes of crashes, but some reports have estimated that such behaviors have contributed to more than half of the accidents on U.S. roads. Think about that. Road rage. What happens outside your vehicle is completely out of your control. All you can do is keep your behavior in check. When you keep your emotions in check, you're doing your best to help everyone make it home safe today. Federated Insurance, it's our business to protect yours.
Dove Men Plus Care products give guys what they need to feel fresh and clean every day. That's why there's Dove Men Care Clean Comfort Body and Face Wash. Its mild but effective formula helps protect his skin from dryness and has a fresh, clean scent. And Dove Men Care Stain Defense Dry Sprays go on instantly dry, giving men 48 hours sweat and odor protection with 1/4 moisturizer technology to help protect skin. Save now on Dove Men Plus Care products using the Cartwheel app, available at Target. Dove Men Plus Care is a proud sponsor of the NCAA Men's Final Four, coming to the U.S. Bank Stadium April 6th through the 8th. Visit hoopscontest.com and share your favorite Final Four memory for a chance to win a pair of tickets to the national semifinal games, the national championship game, and a Target gift card to purchase Dove Men Plus Care products. It's the Tickets to Mini Sweepstakes, presented by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove brand and Unilever are proud partners of the NCAA. No purchase necessary. Target gift cards are registered trademark of Target Brands Incorporated. Terms and conditions apply to gift cards. Target is not a participating partner in or sponsor of this offer.
We're pinning our ears back. ScoreNorth.com.
And this portion of Purple Daily is brought to you by Robert W. Baird & Company.
Purple Daily on the all-new Score North on 1500 and ScoreNorth.com, the only place where you're going to get Vikings and football talk 5 days a week at noon right here on these airwaves and streaming live on ScoreNorth.com, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Twitch. The guy who's usually sitting in this seat at this time for this show and will be sitting in this seat for his very own show, Score North Live, from 2 to 4 this afternoon. Matthew Collar joins us now. Matthew, how are you this afternoon, sir?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm good. And where are you? What's going on with the Vikings today?
I am in the Twins Media Center at TCO Performance Center, and I am awaiting multiple press conferences that will go on today to announce new coaches, including an offensive line coach. I know everyone is super interested in that.
So interested.
Also, quarterback coach Clint Kubiak is here. Gary Kubiak is here. And Kevin Stefanski supposed to talk as well. So there's basically the introduction of all the new additions to the coaching staff this offseason.
That sounds like a lot of press conference. Are you going to be here in time for your radio show at 2 o'clock, or am I hosting every show on these airwaves today?
No, I will.
Okay.
I will, for sure.
All right.
Yeah, you'd be surprised that football people don't always want to take you through all their plans for the offseason, but you know there are a few things that we're looking for. I mean, number one at the top of the list is what is Gary Kubiak's role? I mean, he's being brought in as an offensive assistant. What exactly does that mean? Assistant head coach / offensive advisor. I mean, what is that? I mean, is he going to be on a day-to-day basis here in the facility and working hand in hand with Kevin Stefanski, or is he kind of on the side and Kevin Stefanski runs things and goes to him when he's got a problem or needs advice? I mean, how hands-on is Gary Kubiak going to be? It's pretty clear that Gary Kubiak could have gotten offensive coordinator jobs, that there were interests out there for him, and he decided to take this. I think that's another question as well. And does this mean that the Shanahan-style offense is coming to Minnesota, which I think it is. I mean, I don't think you bring in Gary Kubiak to help you out unless you're going to run that style of offense. So that's going to be quite a change. And here we are with a lot of changes over the last few years for these players, for the guys who have been here. You're asking them to learn a lot of new things again. So I think there are some things that we will be looking for today.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I was frantically Googling it while you were talking there and didn't find the info in time. But didn't they also put assistant head coach as one of the tags on Gary Kubiak? And does that mean anything, or is that just a title that they hand out?
No, that's correct. They did. And that's another thing we want to know is what exactly that means. Now, the way that I interpret that at this moment, before we hear Gary Kubiak talk, is that he will be a go-between with Mike Zimmer and Kevin Stefanski. That, when Pat Shurmur was the offensive coordinator, Mike Zimmer didn't have to ask too many questions about what was going on offense because Pat Shurmur had been around a very long time and had a lot of success in the NFL and was having a lot of success here with the Vikings that season. So there weren't a whole lot of complaints from Mike Zimmer about the offense. But last year, when it was someone less experienced, I think that he struggled to communicate with John DeFilippo, or at least the messages that Zimmer was sending were not getting through all the time to John DeFilippo. And I think the relationship is good between Stefanski and Zimmer. They've been working together for quite some time, but it might not hurt for someone to be in between those two with the way Mike Zimmer has a tendency to get frustrated with his offense.
So, Collar, does this essentially mean that Mike Zimmer, in some ways, with Gary Kubiak being in place, that he maybe feels that he doesn't have to concern himself with the offense as much on game days because he has a guy on the sidelines now, along with Kevin Stefanski, but a guy who has led, coordinated successful offenses in the past, has won a Super Bowl as a head coach. Is Mike Zimmer now feeling like that side of the ball is one less thing that he has to worry about? Now he can really go gung-ho all on the defense on Sundays?
Yeah, no, I think that that's right. I think that Zimmer does have a good understanding for what works for offenses against his defenses. But in terms of being in control of an offense, I don't think that that's something that Zimmer wants a part of. And, I know that he gets criticism for that, but there are other head coaches in the league who only control the offense, don't touch the defense. I mean, you don't have to look very far. Sean McVay has nothing to do with the Los Angeles Rams defense. That's entirely on Wade Phillips to be in control of that. So, it's not super uncommon. I mean, I don't know how someone can coach everything all at once. And when your specialty has always been defense from the time you stepped into the league, it makes a lot of sense for him to put as much focus as he can. I think it's just communicating and also having Gary Kubiak guide Kevin Stefanski if he is going to run this Shanahan style offense. You look back at what Kubiak has done in his career, and it's really impressive. I mean, yes, of course, he had John Elway at the beginning, but, Jake Plummer all of a sudden becomes a great quarterback when he's with Denver. Brian Griese was a good quarterback when he was with Gary Kubiak in Denver as well. And then we saw even Joe Flacco, who has been on the downside, but in 2014 with Gary Kubiak as his offensive coordinator, Flacco had one of the better years of his career. And I think that that's really what Zimmer is looking for here. Maybe less so to just wash his hands of the offense, but maybe more to just have someone who can guide them as best he can. And maybe Kubiak didn't want the full responsibility of being an offensive coordinator because a lot goes on with that. So maybe just where he's been and the health issues he's had at times during his career, it may have influenced him to take a position like this. And that's something that we're going to be asking him for sure. But that's my impression on it.
Talking with Matthew Collar here. He'll be here for Score North Live coming up at 2 o'clock. He's on Purple Daily with us. I wanted to bring you in on the conversation we were having just before we brought you on the air. Manny and I were busy at work freeing up space for the Vikings to go play in free agency or maybe trade for Antonio Brown, whatever tickles your fancy. And here's what we came up with, along with the assistance of Courtney Cronin's contribution to the column at ESPN.com of how teams get out of salary cap hell. We cut Mike Remmers. We traded Xavier Rhodes. We cut Andrew Sendejo. We cut Everson Griffin, and we told Kyle Rudolph either renegotiate or go find a new team. And we saved somewhere between $36.5 and $41.5 million. Matthew, would you not do any one of those 5 moves I just listed off?
Well, I think every one of those that you mentioned is plausible. The one that would probably give me pause in terms of its realistic possibility is the trade of Xavier Rhodes. Because when you look who's running this team and Mike Zimmer, are you going to convince him to trade away the guy that's been his shutdown corner over the last few years? And I understand that Rhodes did not have his best year last year, but when you look at when he was targeted, quarterbacks were still producing a rating of about 88, which is below average. And usually he's locked on to the best receiver that a team has. And if I recall correctly, I think the Packers got him pretty good twice. and then everybody else for the most part didn't. And some penalties really hurt those Pro Football Focus grades, and I think you could probably attribute that a lot to playing through injuries. But I think you'd have a tough time convincing Zimmer, a guy who loves his cornerbacks, and I think that the defense really starts there with the strength in the secondary, that he's going to be traded away. Now, the rest of those things are very plausible. I mean, Kyle Rudolph has zero dead cap if they want to cut him. So I think that they would probably go to him and say, how can we rework this? Because he's a guy that has been extremely reliable. I know that he gets criticized a lot, but every time you throw the football in his direction, he catches it. And if you look at the tight ends around the league, yes, he's certainly not Travis Kelce or Rob Gronkowski, but he is well above average, and I think has been for a long time at the receiving part of the game. So I don't think that they want to move on from him. And then those other spots are really interesting. I mean, Everson Griffin, we don't know a ton of details about what happened with him, and then the second half of the year, what the team thinks of his performance and whether he could turn it around. Clearly, he was not himself over those final few weeks, and that's what makes it tough is, do they see a guy who's going to just bounce back after an off season and has his issues resolved, or someone who's on the downturn of their career and you can move on from him and create a ton of space? And those are the Sendejo and Remmers one, I think, are almost foregone conclusions unless they wanted to rework Remmers' deal to keep him as a swing tackle or just a versatile lineman. But yeah, to your point though, that when we brought up the idea of Antonio Brown, one of the biggest things that was a response was, well, they can't afford him. When you look at some of those moves, yeah, teams can find their way around the salary cap and have been for a very long time.
I love that you went down the road of how plausible it is to trade Xavier Rhodes when you've been talking about trading for Antonio Brown for 12 days. We're not talking about what's plausible. We're talking about what you would do.
Well, yeah, I don't think that Xavier Rhodes would have to be traded in that scenario.
To get Antonio Brown, you mean?
Yeah, because I don't think the price is very high on Antonio Brown. And I was laughing hysterically at their general manager yesterday saying, well, no, we don't have to trade him, when he and the owner just agreed that it was better to part ways. Like, no, I think you do have to trade him. And I also don't think you're getting too many teams to go crazy. Now, would I let go Xavier Rhodes? I would not. I mean, I think that the number one thing in the NFL is passing and stopping the pass. And when you have someone who's capable of shutting down the league's best wide receivers, or at very least, he just alters game plans because he's going to be locked on to the other team's number one. I don't want that gone. I would say that possibly reworking his deal might be in the cards, but I think that you want as much cornerback depth as you could possibly have.
If they do decide to part ways with Everson Griffin, and that's still a big if, we'll see what actually happens there. But if they decide to go that route to part ways with him, would it be wise for them to use a higher draft pick, not necessarily 18, but a higher draft pick on a defensive end, or do you feel like they're in decent shape there depth wise?
Well, I think as it pertains to both Everson Griffin and Sheldon Richardson, when you look at this draft, it is super stacked with really good defensive linemen. And that's one thing that will be a consideration, I would think, as far as whether they bring either one of those players back, is if you draft at 18, you are likely to get a guy who can step right in. I like what I saw from Stephen Weatherly last year. His progress from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 was really significant. And I think he even surprised some people here with how well he was able to step in when Everson Griffin was gone. That being said, it's not easy to replace Everson Griffin, and I don't think Stephen Weatherly was anywhere close to what Griffin is in his prime. And another factor that will go into this is the edge rushers that are out there. I mean, if you're cutting Everson Griffin, you create something in the range of $11 million in cap space. There are a bunch of edge rushers on the free agent market. Some of them may end up getting franchise tagged, like, Dee Ford from Kansas City, Frank Clark from the Seahawks. But when you look at the production that's out there possible on the free agent market, they may look at the situation and say, you know what, for about the same money, we could bring in somebody else that didn't have a downturn in their career or is younger and have somebody over at that position. So the options are numerous. And that's one of the things that they're going to have to weigh here is, Everson Griffen's 31. The bounce back as you get into your 30s seems harder and harder to do. So as much as it would be tough to move on from him because of who he is and who he's been, there are so many options that might be a consideration.
Matthew, I know you got to run. These press conferences are going to start in a minute, and we are up against a break. I just wanted to get your thoughts real quick on one more thing. A couple days ago, Blake Barrett's the agent for Adam Thielen, he was on this show and made it sound as though the two sides were pretty close to a contract extension, which I think everybody around here went, oh, great, that makes sense to keep Adam Thielen around. Louis Riddick, though, yesterday on NFL Live, he had a different take on it. I wanted your thoughts on what Louis Riddick had to say.
There's no question. Look, he's a three-position player. He can play X, Z, and E, meaning he can play the split end, he can play the flanker, he can play in the slot. And literally, the slot is where the yards are there to be had right now in the NFL. When you're talking about a guy who over the past 2 years has 200-plus catches and 13 touchdowns, he's the perfect complement to Stephon Diggs. He's the perfect complement to Kyle Rudolph. He's exactly the kind of player, and as you see here on these highlights, that guaranteed money that they paid to their quarterback, Kirk Cousins, he needs him on this football team. So, yeah, they cannot do without him if they really want to get to where they want to get to, which is ultimately a Super Bowl. But to go ahead and redo his contract at this point and add any kind of guaranteed years onto this, given all the other players they need to extend and sign, not smart.
Says it's not smart to extend Adam Thielen. What do you think?
Well, I respect Louis Riddick quite a bit, but I do think when you have a wide receiver of Adam Thielen's caliber who is making what your number 4 wide receiver might be that you sign off the garbage heap on the free agent market, that there has to be a change there. And I understand where he's coming from, but with the way that they have found to structure contracts in the past, the Vikings have been flat out brilliant with that, with their extensions and finding ways to keep players. And it's one of the things that they get complimented on all the time is how they're able to keep their star players and make sure they're taken care of. And they did that last year with Stephon Diggs and Danielle Hunter. And I would suspect that they do the same thing for Adam Thielen. I understand the argument that, hey, he signed this contract, right? But I mean, if you signed a deal with Hubbard Broadcasting to be a board op and then they made you in control of the whole station, you'd expect to get paid a little more. And that's kind of how it is with Adam Thielen. So, I think that they will take care of him. But, Lewis's point about the quarterback and how much he's getting paid and how much cap space he's taking up, it's right. I mean, that's the thing. When you sign the quarterback to that big of a cap hit, it's going to put you in a lot of very tricky situations. But I think that Thielen is essential to what they do. And the really good wide receivers can often be really good into their early 30s, too. So I think a contract extension makes sense for Adam Thielen.
That's Matthew Collar. He will get the audio and the information from those press conferences today as the Vikings introduce their new assistant coaches, and you'll have it all for you and more on Score North Live coming up at 2 o'clock here on Score North on 1500 and scorenorth.com. Thank you, Matthew. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, guys.
We'll hit a quick break, and on the other side, Manny and I will discuss how wise it is to extend Adam Thielen's contract. You're listening to Purple Daily. Score North on 1500 and scorenorth.com. Back right after this.
Minnesota sports junkie? Get your fix. ScoreNorth.com. Score North Live.